Welcome back to the New Vitality Show on the Healthy Nature Hour. Time flew in that first segment. I can't believe it. I was told when I started radio that time would fly and you wouldn't even be able to believe that the hour was over, and I totally get it now. So I was getting all excited telling you all about my new technology, which is the light beam generator. And it uses light frequencies, both invisible as well as infrared, along with cold gas ionization to bring pain relief and reduction in swelling and inflammation. It also has some anti-aging qualities, so it'll brighten, tighten, reduce facial swelling in the skin, and it's useful for acne and scars and blemishes. This technology was actually developed for well, I don't know if it was developed for the Tour de France team, but the Tour de France team uses it. And when their riders crash, then they're able to get them back on the road the very next day after using the light beam generator. So I've used it already for several people who've had surgeries, and just the pain and the inflammation that you have from the surgery, they notice an immediate difference and they're blown away by it. And I'm blown away. I mean, I've seen it work before because I used it for my own children when they were little. I went to a practitioner who had one, and when they would come in with croup, they'd start that, stridor the first night, and I thought, oh great, here it comes. And it would run through all 4 of these children, and my husband and I would be sleepless for like a month having to sit up with these kids at night. So we would go into the practitioner who had the light beam generator, and they would be lethargic and feverish and kind of cranky, not feeling good, just wanting to sleep. And lo and behold, running the light beam generator on their respiratory system in their lungs, they'd start perking up and go skipping out of the office, never to have another episode of croup after with that round of the virus. So I'm a firm believer in this technology, and if you're interested in trying it out, I'm running a special here in January for 50% off. It's 50 cents a minute for you to use this technology, and we can, go however many minutes you're able to afford. The going rate around the country is about $75 to $225 an hour, so this is a really good rate if you want to check it out in January. So let's get into the material that we have prepared for the show today. And I just want to reiterate that this is, in general, a show for women, and I'm not excluding men, but I do get into talking about scripture, and I just want it to be clear that I'm not acting as a Bible teacher and authority over men. My passion is to restore what God has created for our healing benefit to today's people of God, and like I said at the beginning, there's so much information that's contained in scripture that relates to our health, and we just need to mine it out and seek it out, jewels of great worth. So my vision is that in restoring what God has, what's been stolen, that we'll restore it for the glory of God instead of for the glory of men, because it's been misused for too long, and it's time to put it back into His territory. My first several shows have been an overview of a 12-session seminar series that I offer called Back to Biblical Health for Women, and it's based on live seminars that I presented this last fall to women. There's 2 new sessions, including an introductory session that I offered last Thursday night live at the Crunchy Grocer in Loveland. If you haven't been to that cute little store, awesome health food store, go check it out. It's on Eisenhower right by Sam's. Anyhow, I had the free introductory session. If you missed out on it, go to my website, yournewvitality.com/radio, and download that free ebook version and check it out. And then if you attended my original sessions in the fall, there were only 10 sessions, and now there's a new 11th session that's on the science behind sleep and how to improve your quality of sleep, as well as what does the Bible say about sleep. There's so much information in there about rest. So we have had to reschedule these live presentations that were being held at the Crunchy Grocer. Go ahead and stay tuned for more details. And last time when we left off on the show, December 15th, we were talking about biblical foods. And we had been talking about if God took His people to a land flowing with milk and honey that was abundant in barley and wheat, why are there so many dairy allergies? Why are there so many gluten intolerances? And we talked about that in quite a bit of detail, how the biblical wheat is a completely different organism from what we see today. It's been so altered and hybridized and modified that it's completely different. And every time you hybridize the plant, there's like 5% new protein glutens in each new strain, and the body just doesn't even know what to do with that. And interestingly, those protein glutens can't even be found in the parent plants. So there's something funny going on, and our bodies just don't even know what to do about it. Then we went on and we started talking about milk and dairy. And we started the discussion by talking about cultured dairy products. And that's where I want to start today. So every culture in the world has cultured products or fermented products. Fermented doesn't sound so good to us. We kind of think of rotten and smelly, but actually fermentation is an ancient practice to preserve fruits and vegetables and dairy products, and the Romans fermented fish and made a special fish sauce that I've heard is amazing. It must kind of be like the anchovy sauce that you get through Asian food. In Israel, they had fermented breads. So the sourdough breads that we're familiar with out of San Francisco, that all started in biblical times. And rather than adding yeast to bread, which came along with the Egyptians, people would let the bread ferment, and natural spores and yeast from the air would get into the flour and water mixture and cause it to rise and bubble and give that light texture that we're used to. In Israel, they also had fermented dairy. So we're familiar with this today with yogurts and kefirs and things like that. And for years, I would make my own kefir. You can make a whole gallon for just the price of a gallon of milk just by getting a yogurt starter like at the Crunchy Grocer or Vitamin Cottage. It's called Yo Gourmet. Put that in there, mix it up, and the recipe says that you should heat it up, heat the milk to almost boiling, and then let it cool to about room temperature and add the cultures. But I never did it that way. I have like a lazy housewife version of everything. And I would mix in the cultures just in a gallon of milk and put it in a loosely covered container where the natural spores could still get in from the air, and set it on my kitchen counter, and in about 2 days you'd have this thick kefir or yogurt. And like I said, a whole gallon, for cheap, for just the price of milk. And if you've looked at, like organic cultured foods, they're so expensive. So if you want to save money, make it yourself, and it's easy. And that's what ancient people did. So there's your connection to people in the Bible by preparing your foods in the same ways. Other cultures that had fermented foods would be like Japan with their pickles. My husband and I we went on 2 trips to Japan. I have a girlfriend there from college, and one of the trips that we took was to Kyoto from the Tokyo area. We rode the Shinkansen with my friend and her mother, and it was awesome. But her mom was so excited to buy these special pickles that they had in Kyoto. And so she goes and gets this pickle mixture, and I was shocked. It looked like mud. I think now it was probably miso, but every town and every region has its own special form of the miso that they would ferment the pickles in, and then they would just put the whole vegetable, like a daikon or a cucumber. You could put a carrot in there, all sorts of different vegetables, you name it. Lotus root, that was a popular pickle, and you just put it in like this bag with this muddy looking stuff and mush it all around the vegetable, and pretty soon, you put it in the refrigerator, and after a week or so you have your own new form of pickle, and it's rich with all this miso, which is rich in enzymes and probiotics. And this is the advantage of all these fermented foods, are the probiotics that help improve your gut flora and build your gut health, and then enzymes that help with digestion. And everybody seems to have trouble with digestion. We see so many people on Prilosec and Lactate and all this, and if you eat fermented foods, it's going to really improve your quality of digestion. Korea has their own form of fermented food. I'm sure you've had kimchi before or actually heard of it. It's delicious. There's a brand out there called Ozuke that makes fermented foods, and they have an awesome kimchi recipe. You can make it yourself too. It's got Napa cabbage and hot chilies like cayenne pepper, and what else does it have in there? Ginger, garlic. It's awesome. Russia has their kombucha, which is a fermented tea. If you haven't had it before, it's awesome. And you can make it yourself again, and it's so much cheaper. You can make like a gallon for 50 cents versus paying $3 for a little half-pint sized bottle. The original pickles, I think that most people think of is sauerkraut, from Slavic regions. And then the Hunza, which were in the Pakistan region, they had fermented dairy products as well. So when we talk about all these pickles and these fermented foods, I just want to make a distinction between, pickles that we see in the store that are prepared with vinegar. Fermented foods are just like yogurts, where you have the natural spores from the air getting into the food and creating a fermentation process. So I actually do this at home, and it's way cheaper if you buy a little jar, about a pint-sized jar at the health food store of fermented foods that are delicious. It's about $9. But you can do it at home for just pennies upon the dollar, and it's so simple. And I have a free e-resource that you can download on how to do this, and I do demos of this if you're interested in taking a class. Go to my website, to yournewvitality.com/radio, and download the e-resource on cultured foods. So this leads into why there's so many milk and dairy allergies these days. So hormonally, cows are altered today. We all know this with all the hormones that are added and everything, but there's actually a hormone that stimulates pituitary function in a cow, and if you hyperstimulate this, then the cow produces even more milk than is normal. I think the average cow today, I can't remember the statistic and I don't have it written down. It's something huge, like 60 gallons of milk a day or something, and a cow is only supposed to give like 12 gallons or something outrageous. I might have my figures, tweaked a bit. I probably do, but it's crazy. And we see the same issue within nursing women, and this is a frequent issue that I have with women in my practice, who are wanting to nurse their babies, but they're just not making enough breast milk. And so what we need to do is oftentimes work with the pituitary gland and get that working right. And the thyroid can also be tied to milk production as well. So also with milk allergies, did you know that 30 to 40% of the world population makes lactase? And lactase is the enzyme that you need for lactose digestion. So if only 40% of the world make this, then you can see why so many of the rest of the world has allergies and reactions to lactose. Also, there's high protein diets that are given to cows today, including soy. And if you go back to the way that it was made, the way that God created a cow, the cows were not eating corn in Scripture. They were grazing on fields, eating grass. And there's a big difference not only in the milk, but in the meat. You get omega-3s and other types of vitamins from cows being fed grass than you do when they're eating corn. On top of it, the corn ends up creating a high carbohydrate content in the meat, and corn is added to everything, it seems like. So we're just getting corn everywhere, and that's creating reactivity to milk in some people. Also, milk products today are pasteurized and homogenized. Did you know that if you feed a baby cow pasteurized milk, that it dies within a month? So what does that tell you about what's happening to the quality of the milk? If a baby cow cannot even survive on it, imagine what it's doing to a human, a baby human, your children. So really think about this. There are sources for raw milk. There's actually a store in Loveland called Rocky Plains Freezer Meats, and you can buy a share of raw milk there if you're interested, and I'm not sure, they may have goat milk as well. And I'll be right back with you after the break, and we'll talk more about milk and milk allergies. Welcome back to the New Vitality Show on the Healthy Nature Hour at KHNC 1360. My program's aired the third Wednesday of each month. This is Julie Formby, certified master herbalist, nutritional consultant, iridologist here in the northern Colorado area. I have an office in Windsor and Loveland. Please contact me, get a hold of me. I'd like to hear from you guys out there and get some feedback. What do you want to hear about? What are your issues? What are the topics that you'd like to see covered? Am I hitting the mark with the things that I'm talking about today? So please interact with me. You can also get a hold of me on Facebook at New Vitality LLC or my website, yournewvitality.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for being a loyal listener out there and taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen. I know it's a sacrifice, and we appreciate it here at KHNC. If you want to purchase a recording of this program, call 1-800-205-6245. Today I'm giving an overview of my 12-week seminar series called Back to Biblical Health for Women. There's ebook versions of this on my website that you can purchase along with a free ebook of the introductory session. Please go to my radio page and download it. Check it out. And again, I'd love your feedback. Let me know if it's helpful to you. And then additionally, if you have a women's group who would be interested in the topics that I'm talking on or another topic, contact me. I do lots of public speaking, and I'd love to come in and talk with the women that you know. So we left off before the commercial break talking about why there's so many milk allergies out there today. And the next thing that I wanted to talk about is the fat milk molecule size in cow milk versus goat milk. So cows have these, long digestive tracts, multiple stomachs, and they also have a big liver. And the fat molecule in cow milk is big and fat, and their liver is able to handle it. So some theorize that because we have smaller livers, that this molecule is actually difficult for humans to digest, and that it was, maybe created for cows, not for humans. I'm not sure that I agree with it. We see in scripture that there's references to sheep milk and camel milk and goat milk and cow milk, and we know that they would culture it and drink it cultured. And I think maybe that's the key right there, is that it's cultured. And I think also unprocessed and unpasteurized. So as much as we can get back to biblical eating foods in the way that God made them, eating them in the packages that He made them, and I mean like the skin of an orange and the peel of a banana. That's the package, not a box or not a plastic package. The better off we're going to be with our health, the healthier we're going to be. Another thing that's common with milk allergies is inflammation in the body, and I think this is in particular the pasteurization and homogenization processes that it goes through. And it causes a lot of sinus and ear infections and things of that nature. Another note about pasteurization and homogenization, something that I just learned, is that when the milk is put through this process, that the calcium is actually converted to calcium carbonate, which is the form that we have in our bones, but we can't just take calcium carbonate and expect it to fulfill the calcium need that we have in our body. So we need calcium not just in our bones, but we need it in our blood, and we need it in our tissues. And the form that we need in our blood and tissues is calcium bicarbonate. And we get that if we don't pasteurize our milk. There's of course other forms that you can get it through, but for immune function, calcium bicarbonate is really important. And you can actually, supplement with calcium lactate, calcium malate, calcium citrate. Those are all forms of calcium that can easily be converted by the body into calcium bicarbonate. And Google this. There's actually a thing called a calcium wave in our body that goes out and attacks viruses and surrounds them. They used to call it the calcium cloud, and now scientists sometimes refer to it as the calcium wave. But it will actually go out and envelop viruses, and extra oxygen in our body will also, basically torch these viruses in our bodies. So calcium is really, really important to immune function, and I never realized that until my studies as an herbalist. So another vitamin that's important for calcium absorption into the tissues is vitamin F. You get that through cod liver oil. You can also have supplements with vitamin F in it, but if you have any type of fever condition, or if you have a sunburn, or you want to prevent sunburn, use vitamin F. Vitamin D, when you've been out in the sun, it traps calcium in your blood, and you're out there sweating and everything, and the calcium is exhausted out of your muscles, and then pretty soon you're feeling pretty bad, and you have the sunstroke or you have the sunburn. Vitamin F will take the calcium and ionize it out of your blood and drive it back into your tissues and relieve the sunstroke conditions. If you have a febrile child, vitamin F is also important. So take your calcium. If you have a fever, your calcium citrate, calcium lactate, mix that up. Take it with your vitamin F, take it with vitamin C, some trace minerals, and there's actually studies that have shown that it will reduce the recovery time for severe diseases, including like whooping cough, believe it or not. So that's just a little side fact. I don't usually cover that in my seminar, but that's a topic that I've been studying a lot these days. So I hope that that's helpful to you, especially since we're right in the midst of cold and flu season. But even more than, being prepared with, how to slow down an illness and shorten the duration, eat biblical food. Eat the food as God intended it. Keep your body healthy. Stay away from the processed sugars, the processed flours, fast food. I know my family likes fast food every now and then too, but if your body's already low and you eat your processed foods, then you're probably going to end up sick. So more on this topic of milk. I think, yes, cow milk was definitely drank in biblical times, but I think too, sheep and goat milk were probably much more abundant. And goat milk is what I would call a wonder food. Over 60% of the world population drinks goat milk. Did you know that? I guess the other 40% are Americans who love their cow milk, but most people in the world drink goat milk. And there's so many benefits to it. It's rich in iodine. It's rich in sulfur. Excuse me. It's rich in so many other minerals that are necessary for our body, vitamins and minerals. So if you haven't ever had goat milk, or you have a stereotypical view of it that it doesn't taste good, try the raw version if you're able to get a hold of it. It's really amazing, and you really cannot taste the difference between that and cow milk. So if you want to learn more about eating biblically, reducing your allergies and autoimmune issues by using biblical foods, excuse me, I'm choked. Go out onto my website and download my ebook on the benefits of biblical foods and learn why foods grown in Europe and Israel don't result in the same allergies and disease that we have here. Yes, I've heard of people traveling to Europe and Israel and they can eat the bread there, they can drink the milk and have no problem. So download the ebook and learn why, what's changed. Also, we talked in the last month's show about the intuitive nature of foods. Welcome back to the New Vitality Show on the Healthy Nature Hour at KHNC 1360. Again, I'm your host, Julie Formby, certified master herbalist, nutritional consultant, and iridologist here in the Windsor and Loveland area of Colorado. So, darn commercial cut me off last time. I'm supposed to be prepared for that. But I was talking about the intuitive nature of foods and just reminding you that that's something that's included in the 4th session of Back to Biblical Health for Women. So foods look like the body parts that they resemble. And God made it so simple for us. If we would just take the time to look and get out of, buying things in packages, then we would see how they're originally made. The 5th session of Back to Biblical Health deals with herbs, my favorite since I'm an herbalist. And kind of the key verse that we start with in this session is from Genesis 1:30. In Hebrew we call it Bereshit. Genesis is Bereshit. And everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green herb for food. This is the Lord talking to us. And the way that I look at this verse is it's a simple math equation. So we know from math if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? So if herbs are given for food, and we know that herbs are medicine, then our food is medicine too, right? I love this quote from an anonymous source. It says, mainstream medicine would be way different if they focused on prevention even half as much as they focused on intervention. We can use all of the things that I've talked about in the previous sessions light and the fabrics that we put against our body, and essential oils and the foods that God has made for us, and herbs. We can use all of these in preventive health measures and keep our bodies healthy and functioning and running the way that God designed them to be, and have to intervene much less. But there is a time and a place where we need to intervene. So let's talk a little bit about the history of herbs and of botany. And a main source for this session is a book called Herbs of the Bible by James Duke. And he says that although healing by plants is not explicitly mentioned in the Bible, herbal remedies were numerous and specific. And the ultimate healer was God, and prayer was therefore the remedy most often prescribed. I love that quote. So yes, even though I'm talking about ways to keep our bodies healthy, I've mentioned before that we need to be really cognizant of the fact that health is not the goal. The goal is to have a relationship with the Lord. And we do that through His Word, and everything in His Word tells us how to draw close to Him. And when we do that, when we obey that, including the foods that we put into our bodies, including, in the time when He had the tabernacle and the temple and we could go up and worship there were healing benefits to that for our bodies. And obedience brings health and healing. So seek the Lord, and then all these other things will be added to you. James Duke also points out that many drugs and spices mentioned in the Bible, such as spikenard, myrrh, galbanum, cinnamon, and the like, were never grown in the Middle East, but were imported. So there's actually cinnamon trees that they have found growing in Israel, but those were imported from the Far East, from China and India, where those were more common. Spikenard was carried from the Himalayas in these alabaster boxes, and it's a wonderful smelling herb. Historical scriptures were written by people with little knowledge of botany, James Duke also points out. So the translation by non-botanists have compounded the problem of trying to figure out how do we translate the biblical herb to the modern equivalent. There's a lot of difficulties with that. So there's a lot of speculation, but there's also, some commonality between the different sources. In the Bible, here's an example. Bean refers to fava, and corn refers to wheat. And we know that corn and wheat are two different things, but corn was used to refer to wheat in Scripture. Yet, corn and maize were not even discovered until Columbus sailed to the New World. So just a little interesting fact. The first plant studies of Near East plants were done by Theophrastus in the 3rd and 4th century BC. Actually, I may have said that wrong. 372 to 287 BC. And then the modern study of Egyptian flora was done by a man in 1775 during Napoleonic expeditions. The first book that was ever devoted exclusively to biblical botany was written by Levinus Lemons in 1556 in Latin. So you think about the time span for Scripture. We have Abraham, who was 2000 BC, and we have, the Garden of Eden even further back, some say up to 7,000 years ago. And people are trying to, correlate what this ancient herb was to the modern version, and we run into some problems when the very first biblical botany book was written in 1556. The first systemic study of biblical plants was done by F. Hasselquist, who was a student of Carolus Linnaeus. He was the founder of modern botany, and this guy is so cool because he actually is the one who discovered that chicory called it his floral clock, because it would open exactly at 8:30 a.m. and close exactly at 12:30 p.m. So you could actually use the flowers as a way of telling the time, even if there's no sunlight. So what makes biblical herbs, and any herb for that matter, so potent and powerful are phytochemicals that are contained within the herbs and within foods as well. So there's actually a phenomenon called hormesis, which is spelled Hormesis. If you want to Google it, you can look a little more into it. But it's this notion that a little bit of a compound in plants and foods can be beneficial for you, but a lot of that same compound can actually be toxic. And we see the same thing with wine. So, you know, Paul recommends to Timothy to drink a little wine for his stomach, but we all know the woes of drinking too much wine at a time and how bad that is for our health. So wine is a good example of the hormetic effect. So these small doses of therapeutic herbs and foods, the USDA has confirmed aloe, so aloe vera for radiation burns, chicory. There's a compound in there that's good for HIV. And I'll be right back with you after the break as we continue on. Welcome back to the New Vitality Show on the Healthy Nature Hour. I'm your host, Julie Formby. We left off before the break talking about the hormetic effect of various herbs and foods on our bodies. So there's small quantities of phytochemicals that are beneficial in small quantities, but large quantities can actually be detrimental to our health. So the next one that I wanted to talk about was cinnamon. So we hear about cinnamon all the time for diabetes, and yes, in fact, it does have a confirmed effect upon blood sugar by the USDA. Dill is beneficial for colic. Did you know that? Then there's also a compound, a phytochemical called benzaldehyde, that is in figs. And it's used for the prevention and treatment of cancer. And there's also another compound called psoralen that's effective for AIDS. Figs, we'll be talking about this later, are actually called one of the, they think it's like the key to so many diseases that are going on. And I think it's just amazing that this is one of the most ancient foods, mentioned over and over in scripture, mentioned over and over in ancient cultures, and just how beneficial it is to the health. Garlic is useful for hypertension. Bay laurel leaves are used to treble insulin efficiency, so to balance out blood sugar. And then mandrakes. You heard of mandrakes with Rachel and Leah and the whole trying to get Jacob for the night. Mandrakes contain a compound called scopolamine. Interestingly, scopolamine is a compound that's in a tree in Colombia called the borrachero tree. And people extract this chemical and use it to, they'll slip it into someone's drink and use it to get them to docilely empty their bank account, being completely unaware and never remember what they did. Scopolamine is, there's a synthetic extract that they've created in the lab that they used for women in childbirth and delivery. Years ago, it was called twilight sleep, is the state that they would put women into. They'd combine it with morphine and chlorophyll. And women would be completely docile. They wouldn't feel the pain. They wouldn't remember a thing. But the only problem is they wouldn't remember delivering their babies either, which I think is so sad. This is why they quit using it, because it was just, you know, too much of a amnesic. So next show, time flies. I have to start wrapping things up, but the next show is going to be February 19th. I do hope that you tune in again. We're going to pick up where we left off with talking about the hormetic effect of various herbs. We're also going to go into talking about different herbal preparations and how to do that for yourself and for your family. I do have a workshop that I teach on that, and there's an ebook that you can download on my radio page, yournewvitality.com/radio. So those are all the resources that I have to offer you for today. I've mentioned several. I want to just thank you again to our loyal listeners for tuning in and taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen. I know everybody is crazy trying to run here and run there, so I really appreciate you listening, and I do pray that it was a blessing to you today, that you learned something new, that it was helpful, and giving you hope that you can improve your health, and inspiring you to use biblical resources to address your healthcare concerns, and also empowering you to manage your